of connectivity, the new competition and cooperation between major and regional powers. Before we start the discussion, I would like to have a little survey in this room. First of all, if you have, if you have a relationship, if you have more interaction with your friends, do you think you will tend to have more conflict, or do you think that you will get closer to your friend? Please raise your hand, those who agree that more interaction with your friend will lead to more conflict. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, that's quite half, I think. Okay, so those of you who believe that more interaction leading you to get closer to your friend, how many agree? Okay, there are more who agree with this. Okay, this is interesting. Why? I try to get these issues of connectivity closer to you because for quite a long time, scholars agree that more interaction, transaction, and exchanges, specifically through trade, will bring closer cooperation among countries. But as we see today, it's not always the case. Say, for example, China's mega project on Belt and Road Initiative have led to the question whether it is China's charm offensive to dominate the world. It also led other countries to do the same, make a containment movement. Say, for example, Japan, India, the United States, and Australia with its Indo-Pacific region concepts. And it also raised question on the equality, because it only focuses on Asia and also major powers. Is this connectivity will bring to closing the gap among countries, or it is perpetuating the inequality gap among countries? We don't know yet. There are so many questions about these connectivity issues, and here we will discuss further with 5 honorable speakers. So I would like to invite our speakers. The first speaker we have Pak Siswo from Kemlu. And then the second speaker I have Ambassador Vincent from the EU representative to Indonesia. The third, I have the Honorable Ms. Lyudmila Vorobieva, from Russian representative to Indonesia. I also have Ambassador Curtis Schiff from Milken Institute. And also I have Mr. Yu, right? Please come forward. Dr. Sukmawani from the International Studies, Institute of China's Institute of International Studies. Okay, thank you, honorable speakers. Okay, first of all, excuse me, before we discuss about the politics of connectivity, whether it will lead to competition or cooperation, I would like to ask each of speakers why then now connectivity, particularly infrastructure connectivity, becomes so important in today's geopolitics, and what your country do, for example, Indonesia, European Union, Russia, United States, and also China. What do you do in the middle of this geopolitics of connectivity? Okay, Pak Siswo, please.
First, a comment to your comment. I believe that connectivity is going to bring us closer, and if we are closer, then there's more potential conflict of interest. But with the rule-based mechanism, we believe that conflict of interest does not necessarily turn into violent conflict. So I think this is that competition is part conflict of interest. It's just normal. The more the competitive, the better for the buyers or for the users. So I think I have to stop here or give the chance to the others.
Okay. Ambassador Guerend, how about EU's perspective on this geopolitics? Why geopolitics? Connectivity. Why connectivity is now important for the EU, and how's EU's perspective on this?
Do you expect me now to make my presentation?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, well, I'm glad indeed to participate in this. I have a few slides to share with you. But first and foremost, maybe to answer your question, why between Europe and Asia, and why between Europe and other countries, or Asia and other countries. I think one of the first reasons, and if I could have my slides please, is that Europe and Asia combined represent more than 2/3 of the population, close to 2/3 of the GDP, and 2/3 of the global trade. So there is a very strong rationale for having focusing first and foremost on Asia and Europe. And in addition, if you look at it from a practical point of view, we have a chance to be a landmass, one single continent, with an island around, including Indonesia, but there are many ways of promoting transport links between the two. So if I could have now my presentation, I don't know who's in charge of it. But so we in the EU, it's quite topical to raise this now because we have just this week adopted a new policy on connectivity, where we believe that connectivity goes far beyond just physical infrastructure on transport. Connectivity for us is transport, but also energy networks and digital networks, the digital economy. But it's also certainly also about people to people. And so indeed, thank you. If you go to the next slide, now the 4 areas where we believe that connectivity should be enhanced between Europe and Asia, bearing in mind that we believe that all of this should serve and facilitate human interaction, as we mentioned on point 2, and bring people together. So I certainly agree with Director General Siswo that, well, the closer you get, the more you may have also conflict of interest, and you may have a divergence of point of view, but this should be managed in a sustainable way through a rules-based approach. Next slide, please. Next slide, if possible. And so the way we want to promote it, again, the rationale I've explained to you is very much to use sustainable financial tools and to promote connection by respecting also environment, rules on trade and fair businesses, and fiscal and financial long-term sustainability. Because we're talking about, as was mentioned before, a very long-term approach where you cannot just have a 5 or 10 years scope. You have to look at the very long term. Next slide, please. And so this was presented just this week. The so-called ASEM meeting, which is the Asia-Europe meeting, where you had 51 countries from Europe and Asia represented, including obviously Indonesia. Vice President Kala was in Brussels this week to discuss this global strategy. Next slide, please. So in practice, what does it mean? It means that we want to expand some of the so-called trans-European networks which have been developed in the EU to interconnect the national grids in the EU. We want to expand them to Asia. We certainly also want to have a forward-looking approach to connectivity, and as I said, not just physical transport infrastructure, but also look at the digital dimension of it on ICT. We certainly also want to develop energy networks. As you probably well know, the partitioning of energy grids, the fact that energy provision for gas and for electricity is very often national, with a big obstacle to energy supply, and so we want to interconnect also the energy, and certainly not last but not least, people to people. And here I have my favorite picture with Erasmus scholarship students. We want to promote also the interconnection of people and ideas. Last slide, please. I'm glad to say that China has also been a pioneer with the presentation of the Belt and Road Initiative a couple of years ago already, or 5-6 years ago. We certainly very much welcome this vision of China to create new transport infrastructure. We believe here in this respect that interoperability is the key word. The various new ways of communication should be interoperable. That's particularly true for rail, but not only for rail. We also want to emphasize that our approach is sustainable, comprehensive, and rules-based, as was again mentioned by Siswo, and it has to also benefit directly to the end users who are the people. And last but not least, and this will not be a surprise coming from Europe, we want this to be environmentally friendly and to ultimately be decarbonized, meaning very much electricity powered and by renewable energy. I'll stop here, but just to say that for us, again, connectivity is the key word of our so-called new global strategy, of our engagement to the world, particularly to Asia. And if I come back to one of my earlier points, why Asia? Well, clearly our number 2 trade partner is China, number 3 trade partner is ASEAN, so a huge chunk of our trade goes to Asia, so it's just natural that we want to develop connectivity just for this reason, but also for the obvious reason of developing people contact. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Ambassador Vincent. I think it is interesting because usually when we talk about connectivity, we mainly talking about infrastructure, but EU has a unique concept in the way that it also has other aspect, digital, also people's mobility as well. How much Russia?
Selamat siang to all of you. First of all, I would like to put connectivity in a more broader context, not only economical aspects. I would like to remind that the theme of this conference is where the world is going, where it is drifting. So connectivity is not only about infrastructure or economic relations getting closer or not. It's also very important to have the whole picture, the political context. Connectivity and security issues are connected. Is it good or bad? I come from this former Soviet Union. I studied Karl Marx theory, if you're aware of that. And of course, the communist ideology is gone, but Karl Marx had a point with his dialectics that a thing that seems to be positive and it is being developed at some point of time could turn into an opposite thing and become quite negative, or on the contrary. The way we look at connectivity, when we look at it, we should analyze this concept from different issues. If I may, I would like to give some of the thoughts and views of the Russian Federation on what is happening in the world. It's not very often that you will hear that, We don't have many opportunities, I'll just give you a few thoughts on that. Of course, if you look at the modest and contradictory period, and there are definitely two trends that contradict each other. On the one hand, the polycentric principles of the world are growing stronger. There are new centers of economic growth that are taking shape, especially in the Asia Pacific. One can see nations' so-called status of world leaders, and to slow this, as we think it's irreversible, commitment under the World Trade Organization, multilateral climate agreement, and much more are under attack. And it's a very dangerous trend when the rule of law in international affairs is being replaced with the so-called rules-based order. The question is, who will define these rules? And why is there a need for these new rules when we have international law, we have United Nations, we have UN Charter in place? Needless to say that the international community has to pay a high price for this kind of ambitions, which leads to shrinking of constructive international cooperation, the escalation of confrontation, the rise in general unpredictability, and the significant increase of conflicts. Thus, collective mechanisms of responding to common security issues are making no progress. Diplomacy, negotiation, and compromise are being replaced with political blackmail and unilateral sanctions. The same could be said about trends in global trade. In today's world, the principle of competition and openness are increasingly being replaced by protectionism, while economic interest and reasonability are swapped for ideological conjunction and political pressure. Searching for commonly acceptable agreements and respect for each other's interests are needed more than ever in world trade and economic relations, which today tend to be subject of an unprecedented politicization. The values of free trade have become hostages to trade wars and other forms of unfair competition, including the application of unilateral sanctions. Dear colleagues and friends, Russia has been constantly advocating the philosophy of indivisible economic development, increased connectivity, which actually is enshrined in the Greater Eurasian Partnership concept tabled by our President Vladimir Putin. This large-scale project is open to all nations in Europe and Asia, regardless of their membership in other integration associations. This initiative, be it implemented, can include Eurasian Economic Union, not so long ago established, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and ASEAN member states, including Indonesia. Its implementation could contribute to the establishment of a space for broad economic cooperation that is free as possible from all barriers and to contribute to connectivity. Russia's and China's efforts to link the Eurasian Economic Union construction with One Belt, One Road project are making significant contribution to this end. In conclusion, I would like to focus on the Asia-Pacific region. Of course, as we all know, it's the world's largest center of development and the driver of global economy. Since Russia is an integral part of this region by virtue of geography and history, just look at the map. Russia is a major partner for many Asian countries and ASEAN countries, and a participant in many ASEAN fora, including the ES, the ASEAN Regional Security Forum, ASEAN Defense Ministers meeting with dialogue partners. For us, cooperation with the states and integration associations in the Asia-Pacific region is not time-serving, but it's a strategic and long-term. We consistently promote a positive agenda in the region which integrates the foreign policy and economic components. An equal and indivisible security architecture is essential for Asia-Pacific region based on non-block approaches, the principle of international law, peaceful settlement of disputes, and non-interference in the domestic affairs of sovereign states. For that reason, Russia is quite skeptical about the concept of Indo-Pacific region introduced by the United States, Japan, and Australia, because its core idea of ensuring security is based on, as we deem, false principle of bloc mentality, of excluding some countries from the discussion and of deterring others. We are convinced that security of a state or a group of states cannot be achieved on the expense of other states. That's what we call indivisible security. On the contrary, we sympathize with the Indonesian concept of Indo-Pacific region, which is based on the discourse process, common interests of all stakeholders involved, and hence to create convergence for regional cooperation. The idea of building peaceful, prosperous, and inclusive region is dear to us. We favor openness, transparency, respect for international laws and norms, peaceful settlement of disputes, non-use of force, cooperation, and of course, the core role of ASEAN. Just one second. We are interested in making the most of our potential for cooperation with our neighbors to develop our Siberian and Far Eastern regions and to carry out multilateral or bilateral mutually beneficial projects. China is our strategic partner. We have a privileged partnership with India. We have very good relations with overwhelming majority of other partners in the region, including, of course, Indonesia and Vietnam, our strategic partner among ASEAN countries. Next month in Singapore, we'll be having Russia-ASEAN Summit, back-to-back with the participation of our president for the first time in the East Asian Summit. That actually highlights how important ASEAN and Asia-Pacific region is for us. Our aim is to have a strategic partnership with ASEAN, and hopefully it will be achieved. Thank you.
Now it's getting more interesting, as apparently Russia also have a different conception of connectivity. It's not only about economy, but more than that. And it's not Indo-Pacific, but greater Eurasian concept. We will ask further later, but now we'll go to Ambassador Curtis here. He doesn't represent the American government, but let's say, why then, same question, why connectivity becomes so important for the United States, and how we deal with that, geopolitics and connectivity?
No, thank you. Paktino's not here, because I always thank Paktino for inviting me. Dino and I are what we'd say Asia fellows. We're part-time with a think tank out of Los Angeles and Singapore called the Milken Institute. Focused really on trying to drive money to good causes. Banks won't give you money these days. How do you come up with new means to fund entrepreneurs, ideas, and others? And so I'm very different than my fellow panelists, in that I'm no longer in the US government. First, they always say, well, you don't look like an ambassador, you don't even look like an American, and you look like Jackie Chan, and he's not my own. But it's so great to be here. So I just speak my mind sometimes now. So I don't have any talking points, I don't have any prepared text. But I will share a perspective or two from a couple of my past roles, and one was sitting on the board of directors of the Asian Development Bank. And so this, for those who don't know the ADB, sort of like a Asian version of the World Bank. Lends to 46 countries, 70 members. And Indonesia is one of the largest borrowers. And when I was at the ADB, I was there with a man named Kuruna-san, who's now one of the most important people in the world, head of the Central Bank of Japan. But for China, also one of the more important people, I was there with a man named Jimmy Chun, who now runs China's Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. And so all of these institutions, ADB, AIIB, ASEAN, it's really about bringing, I would hope, countries together. I think that's a wonderful thing. I think that's a terrific thing. And I think you in Indonesia, many of you might want to go into diplomacy, but whatever you do, I've been lucky to be in the private sector, in government, and now in a kind of a nonprofit think tank. Each provides a great career. And I would say to all of you, think through as you go on to other things, how can you encourage connectivity? But connectivity isn't always leading to a good result, I would argue. But connectivity, one thing good about connectivity, balanced connectivity, is increased understanding. Maybe for all of you who are single, maybe it's like dating. Connectivity, you learn more about the person, but then you're like, well, I'm not marrying that person. So if you think about learning about institutions and countries, it's great that we're able to learn more about it. But then you go into your, whatever the relationship, whatever business, personal, whatever, with your eyes open in terms of understanding the good and bad of it. There's always checks and balances, compromises, and all. And so I say to Indonesia, now one of the largest borrowers from the Asian Development Bank, from the World Bank in terms of this region, and some people believe it will be one of the largest borrowers from the AIIB. the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank is that when Indonesia borrows, I say it's with a good cause. It's with helping Indonesian people, it's with increasing connectivity, it's about fighting poverty. But with every loan comes fine print. The US will, from a US perspective, I don't speak for my government anymore, but from a US perspective, we would hope that when a country goes to the ADB or even the IIB or World Bank, they recognize the value of environmental protections, which I think Europe really leads on. They recognize the value of social safeguards. So if you're tearing down what is, for me still sadly, but what has been designated a slum area in Jakarta, I think twice about the people that are going to be resettled. What happens to them? Different institutions will have different safeguards, but Indonesia, you're borrowing money, you decide. So I've just come here from Denpasar, from Bali, where I was at the World Bank IMF annual meetings this year. It's a very interesting session. You know, a lot of attention was to Jokowi's comments, winter is coming. I'm like, I know, what's winter? It's rainy season. That's a good thing. But about, you know, this world should we work closer together. But one of the more interesting sessions was a panel called the Economics of the BRI, the Belt and Road Initiative, One Belt, One Road. And for me, it was fascinating because, you know, when you're in government, you're only allowed to go so far in speaking the truth, to be quite frank. And so World Bank and IMF is very clear, they don't want to talk geopolitics. So the session on the BRI was clearly called the Economics of the BRI. Because, you know, China, the US, Russia, we're all shareholders. We don't want to talk about things so openly. And so the panel was somewhat constrained as to could they talk about the geopolitics of the situation. So of course, when you ask questions, and I hope you ask questions later, the questions that were asked there, you know, didn't just stick to the title. They were all steered to Madam Zhou Jia, if you know her. She's the Vice Minister of Finance of China. All about the BRI, and many about Southeast Asia. What were her thoughts on Malaysia? Prime Minister Mahathir, soon after taking office, has rejected 3 projects that are kind of part of the BRI, with a very clear message I think every country should take to heart, whether they're borrowing from the World Bank, private bank, which is one, Malaysia does not need these BRI projects that the former Prime Minister committed Malaysian taxpayers to pay for. Malaysia cannot afford these projects, and then Asia, like, can I really pay them back? And so the Vice Minister of China was asked this question, and she's a diplomat. So she had to say, we respect Malaysia's decision after their assessment of debt sustainability, and what worked, and of course China said. But we see some of these conversations now in the Sri Lankas and African countries of the world. But it's not good or bad. Each country makes its own assessment. And I remember in my US role, when I'd say to a country, do you want to borrow from the World Bank or ADB or a bilateral bank? There's always fine print. Always read that fine print, Indonesia. So for an ADB project, you might have to pay things to make people's lives better if you're going to relocate them. You might have to protect your environment. For me, those are good things. For a project from another country, it might have different kinds of fine print, not good or bad. It might come with labor from that country. It might come with all kinds of support from that country. Again, not good or bad, but just a different approach to development. So connectivity, for me, when I think about infrastructure, my own experiences on the ADB board with US Treasury, is a good thing. Indonesia should let ASEAN thrive. One of the challenges in Indonesia is more than half, or approximately half of the economic growth of this region. Will Indonesia let ASEAN thrive? Or will ASEAN become a little bit like I've heard of SARC, which is a South Asia version, where India is a dominant player. SARC does not thrive. Maybe India does not want an independent, connected organization. So I would say to you all, as you think about your careers, how you encourage connectivity, go in with your eyes open, ask questions. You know, you're also young. There's new means to bring accountability to organizations, whether you're Western or Eastern. One is social media. People who know me, I'm out of control on Twitter. I'm tweeting right now. I don't know, it's like a lot is programmed. But I'd say use social media to point out corruption. Use social media to point out when they've torn down your neighbor's little warung, because maybe a powerful person has certain interests. So for us as individuals beginning your careers in government or elsewhere, I'm excited for you. So go forth, as Dina always tells me, change this world that we're all in. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sujian. Many have heard about China's Belt and Road incident, but then perhaps first of all, what makes connectivity so important for China?
Connectivity is important. Put it shortly, because all countries, all people in the world are in the same boat. That's basically, that's why the President of China, Xi Jinping, put forward the idea to build a community of the shared future of human beings. And this idea has been implemented into some important documents of the United Nations. Connectivity is important because we are living in an independent world. In spite of the divergences and contradictions in the world. Of course, connectivity itself does not explain everything. Connectivity both gives rise to interactions of friendship, cooperation, but at the same time, also from time to time gives rise to contradictions, problems as well. Only because it is influenced by many other factors, such as balance of power, international power, distribution of international power is changed, and by the transformation of international order and regional order as well, and by some passport issues, which tend to create very complicated regional scenarios, geopolitical scenarios, exactly because of those the influence of those complicated factors. Now, geopolitics in the world and in this region in particular has entered into a period of transition. Very critical stage, very critical period, where we can see both a lot of real and potential risks, and in the same time, of course, we also have a lot of opportunities to utilize. Let me quite briefly share with you some of my ideas about those two aspects, both of risks and opportunities, with the changing geopolitics of connectivity in this region, in this world. The most important serious risks comes from the changing world. In my view, comes from the intensified competition, if not rivalry, between major powers, between the United States and China in particular. And to a lesser extent, between US and Russia. The growing competition between major powers is in danger of being led to the wrong track of a zero-sum game. That's the most important, dangerous thing. And this is the source of many problems, because competitions between major powers, between different countries are normal if they are benign competitions. But if competitions is based on zero-sum games, zero-sum logic, so it's a huge problem, big problem, especially between major powers. Second kind of risks is concerned with problems with current international order. For instance, the existing international order can no longer effectively address challenges in many fields, including climate change, right? And second problem is reflected in the kind of partial collapse or partial paralysis, so to speak, of the existing international order, mainly because some of the major countries, especially the United States, recently withdraw from international regimes. And the third kind of problem concerning international order is reflected in the sense that competition and conflicts between major powers may distort reform of international regimes in the wrong directions. For instance, the reform WTO is facing a serious test in the sense that some Western countries, led by the United States, are trying to impose some discriminatory articles over fair trade targeting at specific emerging countries, especially at China. Last but not least, the world may be fragmented and divided into conflicting blocs or groups if competition between major powers continued unchecked in the zero-sum direction, and regional powers are forced to take side with either of those conflicting major powers. A new Cold War scenario is not something unthinkable, in my view. If that happened, it would be a nightmare for the world. Fortunately, as I mentioned, in any case, we are still in an independent world, and in such a world, peace makes more profits. In such a world, nations have ever-enlarging romantic potentials to increase their wealth through peaceful means. Because innovations in science, technology, and in business have replaced acquisition of natural resources as the most significant way of driving growth and achieving prosperity. In such a world, with the development of modern technology, the cost of war between major powers have become unbearable and even unthinkable. So, with this, I'll conclude my remarks by suggesting that the following approaches are important in steering the situation in the current world. First, that is to promote strategic mutual trust between major powers are the most important things through dialogue and cooperation. And second, the reform of international regimes such as WTO should be carried out with correct guidelines. Multilateralism, openness, free trade, fair trade are some of the most important essential ingredients of the guidelines. Third, both major powers and regional powers can do something meaningful to prevent the world from sliding into a new Cold War. Major powers should refrain from handling mutual competition with a zero-sum logic, as I mentioned, or Cold War mentality, while facing struggle between major powers. Regional powers should evade taking side with either party of conflicting major powers. Without the participation of regional powers, no single major power is capable of launching a Cold War, even if it wants to. Thank you.
Before I give the floor to the audience to ask questions, I would like to go back to Siswo because you have really elaborated. What is the importance of connectivity for Indonesia, and what is the role of Indonesia amid this connectivity competition among major powers in the region?
Thank you. I believe I have my slide here. Can someone help me with my slide? I need it now. But in the session on Indo-Pacific earlier this morning, I stressed again our concept of Indo-Pacific is to embrace various concepts of Indo-Pacific and try to find commonalities. Yeah, so American one, Chinese one, BRI, and Japan. We believe there always possibility for cooperation because we can always find convergence of interest. Now, China and Japan, they have programs, so-called China-Japanese third market. They're going to do things in Thailand as far as cooperation. Now, China and French, they also do things together in Francophonic Africa. So cooperation is always possible. Yeah. Now, can we see the next? Please open it. This one, China things on PRI. Next one. Next one, please. This is ASEAN experience. Yeah, and Indonesia will be doing things like this. Next one. Next one. And this is the story. If you see the bright light, there will be a lot of money. If it's dark, no money. Yeah. So connecting bright to bright is very easy. Connecting bright to black part is very difficult. Indonesia, in the western part, is very bright. Java, Sumatra, and the eastern part is dark. So connecting from the bright part to the dark part is quite challenging because we are talking about load factors, we are talking about economic of scale. So if we are talking on connectivity, it's never one size fits all. The correct connectivity for the correct economy is the challenge. Now, see the bright parts here, like Europe is very bright, East Asia, China, Japan, Korea is very bright. But please see the next slide. Next slide, please. Now, this one. Now, if you look at this, the level of trade in European Union, we are talking about $3 trillion per year. Here in East Asia, you are talking also $3 trillion. China, Japan, and Korea. But why the size of harbors in our region tend to be larger than the one in European Union? It's smaller, but we still have the same $3 trillion. So connectivity is not about infrastructure, but it's also about efficiencies, innovations. So it's not necessary for eastern part of Indonesia to have 20 meters deep, for instance. If the economy is only for 6 meters, 12 meters, yeah. So digging 20 meters and then we have an overcapacity is also not good for the connectivity. So again, as far as Indonesia is concerned, we have variety of development in our regions, very developed western part, less developed eastern part. The point of connectivity to bring more wealth, more growth from the west to the east, with the correct infrastructure and correct connectivity, and hopefully this will involve IT connectivity. Is going to it will involve on culture as well, and it's not necessary to build a new harbor. We have a cooperation with Germany, for instance, on how to improve the performance of small harbors. We call it the commercialization of small harbors. So capacity building is part of it, efficiency and so on. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pak Siswo, for the brief explanation. How about the audience? You have questions to the speaker? 2 questions only. One, and I would like to choose at the very back comment. Yeah.
Major power playground has been making the grass break, and if they are having a conflict, that all small power will they fix all. So my question is about the rule-based connectivity geopolitical. I think, if I may say it about, all the major powers have violated the rule-based order itself. All major powers. For example, you can see that America with their multilateralism in the Eastern, or you can see that Russia in the Crimea and the Georgia, Ossetia, and you can see that how the UNCLOS not followed by the China in their car with the Philippines in South China Sea. So if we talk about the connectivity with the rule-based, the major power is the most violation rule-based itself. So my question is about what is like what Mr. from the CIFP said, that what is the major power should do to negotiate and dialogue and make a dialogue to make the best route to all of the multilateralism, and that can be a mutual benefit for all of the countries, not only for the major power itself, but for the peripheral or even the peripheral or undeveloped countries. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nava, and I would like to actually ask 2 questions. The first one is specific question for the ambassador of Russian Federation regarding to the statement before. Let's see. The statement before that. You stated that the Asia-Pacific, Indo-Pacific idea of Japan, Australia, and the US excluded some countries. Could you please specify what are those some countries are? And that's the first one. And the second one, regarding to the theme, would the geopolitics of the future geopolitics of connectivity create more competitions or more cooperations? Thank you.
For all the speakers to answer the question. So the first question related to the rule-based connectivity. It seems that all major players break the rules. So how to fix it, basically? Okay, so it's question for all speakers. And the second question for all speakers related to again. What's the second question? Oh yeah, true. And also specifically for Russia, which country is excluded from the Indo-Pacific? Okay, please from Siswo perhaps.
Yeah, I think rule-based international law is dynamics. It's never been static. So if you look at how the international law is growing, the first one we have a convention, but sometime after 100 years you need to review the convention. So changing of the law is something natural. Then we have the so-called opinion jurists that people start thinking, hey, we need to improve. When everyone follow, then we have a use convention, new norm as before now. Now it's very interesting to see that rule-based also follow money. Now we have ASEAN century. We have China with 21 trillion US dollar purchasing power parity. We have Japan and Korea and others. We have East ASEAN Summit. The total number, the total money of the East ASEAN Summit, if we count it together, is 65 trillion US dollar. But mostly they are in Asia. Now, of course, there is a new, not a visionist theory, but of course there is new demand. A new demand when the money and the power start concentrating in Asia. Now, the point is that the rule-based thing, dynamics, but the way we improve the law, it should be based on a democratic process that everyone will contribute on it. The descending power and also the rising power. So I think this is the main point.
Okay, Ambassador Guerend.
And clearly the rules are not self-invented or ad hoc. They are the rules of the WTO mentioned before, the rules in terms of environment of the Paris Agreement, basically UNCLOS for freedom of navigation. So the set of rules which are existing, which are enshrined in the UN and the various conventions under the UN umbrella. So there's nothing new here, it's just established, ratified UN international framework.
Well, I think your question is very multidimensional. First of all, rule-based, I mentioned already, okay, we have international law. Who will define the rules? Why are new rules needed? My second point is that every time that international law was violated or multilateral mechanisms were not used by a certain power or powers, led to disaster. Examples very easy: Iraq, Libya, Syria. So that is a very dangerous thing to violate international law and to try to do things unilaterally. Also, my third point, connectivity, group-based connectivity. You are asking this to the ambassador of a country which is under unilateral sanctions, and the aim of these sanctions actually is to marginalize our country, to isolate our country, to prevent it from being connected. You remember President Obama said that Russia is isolated with the economy in shreds, which is not true, of course. So the question is how connectivity relates to competition, to the seek of domination. Competition is okay between major powers. Seeking dominance and destroying multilateral structures is a totally different thing. And of course, I cannot avoid commenting your statement that Russia also violated rules or laws, international law in Crimea, Ossetia, Abkhazia. Okay, Crimea. There was a referendum attended by 98% of the population of this region, which voted for independence, first for independence of Crimea from Ukraine, second for Crimea to join Russia. If it's not democratic, then what is? If you remember in Kosovo, which is very much supported by all Western democracies, there were no referendum, there were just decision by the parliament, and still it is acknowledged. Abkhazia, Ossetia also, now it is common knowledge that actually Georgia attacked these regions, and our peacekeepers were also attacked by Georgia. So Russia actually intervened to support the peacekeeper forces that were in these two regions, and also, well, the UN Charter states the right of nations for self-determination. So what international law did Russia violate? Thank you.
I'm intrigued if you're applauding for the statements on Russia, Georgia, and Crimea. Clearly I don't speak for the U.S., because if I did, I'd have to respond to these comments. But I want to take off on something that you said, which I think is the bigger point of this discussion today, is who writes the rules? Is one of the challenges. Is it the victors from World War II? World War II was what, 76 years ago, 75 years ago, a long time ago. Who writes the rules? And so again, I say to all of you, you can read the media, the real news, the fake news, whatever kind of news it is, and you decide. Do you want the rules written for you by Russia, by China, by India, and you decide. And focus first on your own world. You know, I always say to people, you know, they say, well, what can I do? You know, I'm just a new college graduate, I'm working, I gotta pay for my life, you know, I can't do all these big things. And I see it in things like corruption, right? People say, how do I fight corruption? And life is a compromise. You know, I don't want to be corrupt, but what if I can't get my kid into school without paying someone a fee? What do you do? And these are very difficult questions. So you can imagine at this geopolitical level, do you stand up and go to war to protect the people of whatever area, whoever you want to say is there? Do you support people's self-determination in a Hong Kong, in a Tibet, in a Xinjiang, in, I don't know, some part of the US? Very difficult questions. And so for those of you going into diplomacy, I say think about the rules and what can you do to contribute to make it a better world. You know, I remember like 2 years ago, all we ever talked about was the AEC, the ASEAN Economic Community. No one ever talks about it anymore. But it was like, are we ready for the AEC? Are we ready for the AEC? But the AEC process was also a complex negotiation. And the reality is the countries moved towards the lowest common denominator. We didn't want free movement of labor, right? Because I'm afraid of that country's, all those poor people will come to my country. So I think we also have to think through, be honest with ourselves. that we may stand for all these great ideals of free speech and democracy and human rights. But life, sadly, is a compromise. But I say to you, as you continue on your careers, think through what you can do to make things incrementally better. Listen to all of us and decide, do you want to be like this country or that country, or none of them? Indonesia, forge your own path forward. That's a wonderful thing. And take the best from everyone and set an example for others to follow. Indonesia is, I can't remember now, I think the 4th largest country in the world by population. Imagine if you were the 4th biggest economy in the world and the strength and power that economic power brings. And so I hope Indonesia will move forward and do it in a way that learns from all the good and the bad of all of our countries up here on the stage have done to the rest of the world and set an example for others.
Okay. To build a rule-based world, I think the most important serious challenge faced by today is concerned with the potential danger of a divided world. Because some major Western powers, mainly the United States, and to a lesser extent perhaps, some European countries, and plus some other developed countries, trying to establish some kind of a coalition targeting at mainland China and some other emerging countries. If that kind of things happen, then it would mean a world divided by the developed world on one hand, and emerging countries on the other. For this kind of divided world, you can hardly expect a law-based international order, because there's no law which can govern, all the behaviors of all countries, right? So that's the thing we should, prevent from happening. And the approach to prevent this, I think, again, emphasize the following ingredients: multilateralism vis-à-vis unilateralism, openness vis-à-vis protectionism, and another idea is insistence on free trade and fair trade. Okay? Free trade and fair trade are like a twin, right? Free trade is openness is the basis for free trade and a fair trade. Free trade and a fair trade, as I said, are like a twin. Without free trade, there's no such a thing as fair trade. And of course, free trade is not sustainable without a fair trade. We need to strike a balance between those important ingredients. Thank you.
And there was a direct question to me on the Indo-Pacific concept by trying to be introduced by the Western countries. Which countries it doesn't include? Well, if you want to have, well, of course China, and to a certain extent Russia. And we're talking about connectivity. That's why the Indonesian concept, as I mentioned, very much coincides with the Russia's view on the regional architecture that should be in place. Not based on bloc approach, but on multilateral structures. Actually, Russia initiated the discussion on, together with China and ASEAN, on the Asia-Pacific security architecture under the aegis of EAS. There were already 5 or 6 seminars conducted on this issue, and we see a lot of similarity in our approaches with Indonesia to this very complex issue. Thank you.
short. Ambassador Guerend.
Yes, thank you. There was, I think, the second part of the question asked by, raised by Pastor Nama about connectivity, whether it leads to more competition or more cooperation, or whether there's a trade-off between the two. I think, based at least on the European approach, clearly more connectivity brings more exchange, but more exchange brings certainly, at the end of the day, a better quality of service, a better quality of goods, etc. I just take one example coming from the people-to-people dimension, university. In Europe, we have promoted a lot of university exchanges beyond borders at European level, also with this Erasmus program. And there's now almost no single European university which doesn't propose one semester or a quarter in another university abroad. And this has led to a huge increase, of the exchange of students, but also ultimately to an increase of the level of the curriculum, because there's much more exchange of lecturers, of students, and I really believe that the level of the studies and curriculums in Europe has increased through this. And this is something we want to expand worldwide. We are also supporting this in ASEAN. So just in a nutshell, more connectivity brings maybe more competition, but competition is not bad as such. It emulates, and it certainly brings a higher quality of exchange and a higher quality of life and of products and services.
Okay, because we have no more time, I just want to ask each speaker. Our conference topic is ideas to fix problems, and in these panels we talk about problems of connectivity. So please give to the audience at least one sentence, one idea, one sentence only, the idea to at least what areas of cooperation among major powers that they can do in terms of geopolitics of connectivity. Siswo, please.
Connectivity is very expensive, so what we need is openness. So people can really see what is offered and how it is offered. Openness, I think, is the key for building connectivity, for competition or for cooperation. Without openness, it's very difficult for you to have a correct judgment and which of the connectivity being offered is the best for you. Yeah.
Okay, Ambassador Guerend.
Yes, certainly, and openness. I had also this on my list, and benchmarking. There's a lot offer on in the world, but just go, make your shopping, compare, and you can take a little bit from this, a little bit from that, and do openness and benchmarking. For me, is something which leads to better supply and better demand.
I would say equality, connectivity based on equal rights for all the nations, be it large or small. Without equality, there cannot be connectivity that could bring benefits to all the nations.
It's funny, I was going to say, and I will say, a little bit of the opposite in terms of, as we connect, I find one of the challenges has been greater inequality. And so I would just encourage us, again, to each of us get our acts together at home. Donald Trump has been very aggressive in touting Make America Great Again. But as I travel a lot in this region, the reality is that what I did part of the year in Indonesia, people are saying, Indonesia, we need to make Indonesia great again. We make Russia great again, we make China great again. And so the ambassador said it's already great. But as you think about what you do to stay great, I do wonder about how inequality is getting worse. And will this greatness be sustainable without our addressing inequality? And I think that's what we should focus on, including here in Indonesia.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Sujan.
Yeah, I want to say something less philosophical. What Donald Trump emphasized Make America Great Again, I think in the context of today's topic about connectivity, I want to emphasize that the world, especially this region, need to pay more attention to the idea of make the world as a whole great again, right? And in this regard, I think One Belt One Road initiative can play a key role, especially in this region. But to better implement this initiative, this idea, it needs the more positive role played by all countries, all powers in this region and beyond in the cooperation around this initiative. That's my advice and suggestion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for all the speakers. I really apologize. I believe you have many questions, but the issues of connectivity is relatively new and there are so many issues. What I can conclude from this panel is that there are various initiatives of connectivity and each country have their own versions of connectivity. And all speakers agree that competition is actually no problem, but what we need is rule-based, how local governance to deal with this connectivity.